Hello, this is Angelica Yingst, and you're listening to Centered, grounded conversations about the metaphysical. Blessed October, it's Angelica Yingst. I'm here with your Tarot, Earth Medicine, and Sky Medicine reading for October. And if you don't know, when I say Sky Medicine, I really mean astrology. So I'm just giving you a lay of the land, okay, for October. So here in the Northern Hemisphere, I don't know about the Southern Hemisphere. I'm assuming it's starting to get a little warmer. But here in the North, we can start to feel that chill in the air. And when we start to feel that, most people I know are pretty excited for autumn because autumn is just a beautiful time of the year. There's leaves changing, there's pumpkins, and of course, there's the cliched thinning of the veil. But there really is a sense in the air of the spirits of nature being alive and preparing for winter. We can feel the ancestors, the spirits of the land, the elementals. And I think maybe it all wraps up with that idea of like there's more than meets the eye. And that has that kind of energy invading everything. You know, it's sort of infused with everything. So I'm always surprised on those October mornings as the sun rises eerily through like thick fog that's settled on the land, and you only see like the silhouette of trees, and every bird that rises from the fog feels like an omen or a sign or the medicine I need at the moment. And I think, October, you are a mood girl. And I love it. I'm here for it. I watch Practical Magic. I watch all the Halloween movies that don't involve gore because I'm very sensitive. I'm a highly sensitive person, people. Either way, we just start pulling out the metaphorical and literal skeletons out of the closet. So this October, we're feeling some cosmic chaos, and that's because we have eclipses and, of course, all the spirits in the night. So eclipses are often those moments that bring the winds of change with them. So they kind of catalyze and exaggerate issues already present. They make you aware of patterns and shadow. And sometimes it's in a way that feels sudden or very tower-like in their revelations. And so that's really a tarot reference. So the tower is the 17th card. No, sorry, the 16th card of the major arcana, and it's really about chaos. Okay, it's about everything kind of falling down around you. And sometimes eclipses can be like that. And other times they're just like, bitch, I don't think you're listening. So I'm going to try to shake things up for you so you pay attention to the stuff I've been trying to tell you. And so the universe is like, I'm not playing anymore. And we'll really talk about those moments through October, but it can kind of feel like, but a lot of times it's issues you've already been dealing with, and they just kind of come together and you can see, oh, this is what you've been trying to tell me. Okay. So October kicks off this new moon in Aries, which was on the 29th of September. And that has this real, so Aries is a warrior and Libra is a diplomat. Okay. And so we kind of are navigating the tension between those two places. And the full moon has some real activating energy. And that's what we start October with. We're kind of like coming out of that energy. Now, if you're interested and you follow me on all the socials, I created some graphics for understanding the interplay between Aries and Libra. And I think I'm going to start doing that for the full moons because that is why full moons feel so activating and energizing. There's some tension between where the moon is and where the sun is. And they lie, exactly opposite on the wheel of the astrology. So they're kind of opposite. So that tension between, like, for example, Aries is concerned with the self and leadership, and Libra is concerned with diplomacy and the other relationships. And so when this time comes, then we deal with issues of like harmony and balance and justice and social grace. And because Libra is so powerful, then we end up being pretty capable of communicating those things really well. So Mercury is moving into Libra on the 4th of October, and that brings a different kind of compassion and diplomacy to our professional conversations and even our social relationships. So in this way, it's like kind of a boost for building relationships on the 4th of October. So Libra's charm and diplomacy plus our innate wisdom and intuition will equal not only the ability to see all the sides in a situation, but to evaluate, integrate, and find the medicine in there. That's really what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to find the medicine. And I don't mean medicine in terms of like aspirin. I mean medicine like wisdom, the mystery that runs through all, that brings us our lessons, right? So Venus enters Virgo then on the 8th, and on October 10th, Pluto, which is the planet of transformation, ends its 4-month retrograde in Capricorn. So Venus is in Virgo on the 8th, and Pluto is ending retrograde in Capricorn. So these are both Earth signs, and they bring a kind of, and I'm going to use this quote, grounded momentum. Okay, and I think I saw an astrologer, and I should have written down who wrote that, but I like that phrase, grounded momentum, because it's kind of an oxymoron when we think of grounding. We think of standing still and being stable. The momentum is movement. But what it really does is encapsulate how we grow when we're in earth signs. We need to have that stability to be able to move. Okay, so we have to carry our stability with us. And we all know we can think of unstable ways of traveling and we can think of stable ways of traveling. So think of that grounded momentum as having kind of, you know, how an RV carries its home with it. You know, like maybe that's a good metaphor of like you're moving forward. So in particular, when Pluto stations direct, it basically reorients us towards our goals and our most pressing priorities. So it asks us to find joy in our work, okay? And asks us to kind of, hey, where are your priorities and how do you get there? And also, you know, find joy and fun and excitement and the thing that got us to start the damn project to begin with, okay? So then Mars, the planet of action, enters Scorpio, and this is the sign that it rules on October 12th. And that stays, Mars stays in Scorpio for 6 weeks. And so that's basically October 12th till the end of November. And so honestly, this is a super good time. Super good. This is a great time to be more strategic, decisive, intuitive. It enables us to kind of execute our actionable items. Okay, but also be super like passionate about it. Get excited about it. This is super get her done cowboy energy. Okay, Mars and Scorpio. So Mars forms a trine with Saturn as it enters Scorpio. And once, I mean, that's kind of why I'm like, this is the ability to execute your actionable items. That's because Saturn is a to-do list maker. It's a rule maker. It gets things done. It's serious. It's like, let's get down to business. But when you have that passion of Mars and Scorpio, we tend to do it and want to feel good. So we're kind of aligning with our soul path. We're trying to make things fun. We're seeing the fun in things. Okay, we're looking for it. So let's start talking about eclipses then. Because October 14th, the new moon in Libra is a solar eclipse. That's at 1:55 p.m. on the East Coast. And then 2 weeks later, there's a full moon in Taurus, which is a lunar eclipse. And that rounds out these 2-year cycle of eclipses in Taurus-Scorpio. Okay, and that's kind of the end. All right. So when we're talking about the end of an eclipse cycle, so what that means basically is the moon and sun will be like with the opposite signs, right, in these eclipses. And we see them together because we're close to the North Node and the South Node. And so the solar eclipse in Libra is basically going to be like a new moon on steroids. And that's on the 14th. And that really could be a cosmic shakeup. Eclipses really shake us up, like I was saying, the upcoming new moon eclipse basically is a collaboration with Mercury. So it can bring some real revelations or sort of start you off on that urge to really express yourself and your truth and tell the truth to other people. Okay, so we're kind of dealing with these 2-year eclipses in Taurus and Scorpio, and they really deal with control and how to release control and how to process our need for that. And often that comes with understanding trauma that got us there, survival mechanisms that got us there. So we'll kind of see this. So anticipate kind of having that shakeup and then getting lots of clarity. And particularly on the 19th and 20th, Mercury's going to cazimi in Libra. That means it's going to have be near the sun. And so the sun and Mercury will be in the South Node. Okay, so that really casts this like fresh illumination on events that happened in the eclipse weekend, and also foreshadowing maybe upcoming eclipse energy, which will be at the end of the month. All right, so as we approach October 22nd, Scorpio is pretty enigmatic and commanding and strong. It has lots of this darkness. It's ruled by Mars and Pluto, right? So it's got some interesting energy. So we're going to move into Scorpio season, around the 22nd, 23rd. And during the beginning of it, the Sun and Mercury form trines with Saturn. And this is really the way forward of figuring out how to find our emotional balance, how to confront our fears, how to look at what's happening below the surface, and really just kind of think about our determination. So our eclipses are on the 14th and the 28th. And so the 28th, we are going to have that lunar eclipse in Taurus. And so with that full moon energy on Halloween weekend, we really do get to kind of see this transformation we've undergone the past 2 years. And so it really is the end of this Taurus-Scorpio soap opera that we've been living for the past 2 years. But thanks to the way the moon is aligned with Jupiter during that eclipse, it might be dramatic and grandiose, but it'll also have a lot of joy in it. And I think there's, an interesting sense of like excitement to it. And it should be kind of exciting. There is like unpredictability to it, which can always be scary. But because of this trine between Venus and Jupiter, you'll have a really okay time, I think. I think it'll be more revelation than anything else. So our significant days are October 10th, Pluto retrograde ends. October 14th, the solar eclipse in Libra. October 23rd, Scorpio season begins. October 28th, there's a lunar eclipse. And of course, on October 31st, Samhain, or Halloween, happens. And then we get to move into the times of the dead, which are always fun. The tarot card of the month is the Hermit. And I just want to say, we had the Hermit in June. And so I put it back in and tried to pull another card. And I just couldn't shake the Hermit was our card to wrestle with this month. And it feels right based on the sky medicine. And also, October is a time of hermiting in some ways. And what I mean by that is searching for and wrestling with wisdom, relationships, isolation, enlightenment. The solitary figure on the Hermit really remains one of the most mysterious and also recognizable archetypes of the tarot. It is the wise man, and as an archetype, the hermit appears in many cultures and many religions. And Pamela Coleman Smith, who is called Pixie, based the hermit on Merlin, but we do have that hermetic archetype in a lot of different stories and that search for enlightenment. I mean, Christian monks joined those silent orders and seclude in a monastery. The Buddha went into the woods as an ascetic. Jesus went to the desert for 40 days. Muhammad went into the cave, and Moses, came back from the mountain alone with the tablets, right? And so when we see, that idea of Merlin coming out of his cave, we are really thinking of wisdom being brought out for people. And I just have to say, too, that many, shaman will go out into the woods or into wherever for basically, like in Australia, it's called walkabout, but in Native American tribes, sometimes it's called vision quest, though, obviously that's not a monolith, but the shaman will go inward, even though they're, in the community and they serve the community, they will go out into the desert or into the forest or wherever for their own connection with spirit. Okay, so, if we talk about something like Vision Quest, it's a time where it's a rite of passage and the warrior will go into the wilderness to face his fears and his demons and truly to face himself, right? Because we sit alone without food, without drink, without help, and we just sit and wait for the medicine. So, a lot of times we can kind of see those small vision quests that we do all the time in Journey State or whatever, as kind of facing our fears and demons. And, drugs, drinking, overeating, gambling, all those addictive ways of being, those ways of dealing with the aloneness in your head that, we can kind of think of the hermit as really going into those places without the soul sedatives we're used to doing. I even, in Rachel Pollack's one book, she says that the modern hermit experience could be going into therapy every week because we leave regular society and then go through the process of self-discovery. So whenever I pull the hermit, I'm always asking, is this you or is this the teacher coming into your life? Are you seeking the teacher or are you the teacher? Are you going inward or are you waiting for someone who's coming out of the forest to talk to you, right? So when we connect with our inner hermit, we're kind of separating out time to journey, to study, to read, to explore, to kind of solidify our beliefs. This is a time to really shine the light on knowledge as a way of understanding. We can say enlightenment if you want to, though. It is specific to certain religions, and I'm sort of trying to move away from saying, oh, you achieve some enlightenment, because I think that's, it's so specific to certain religions. I would hate to say that. But what we're really doing is shining a beautiful light into the darkness and thinking about what that means, right? Do you have a mentor? Do you have a teacher? What does this look like for you? What are they showing you? The hermit isolates, okay? And that isolation is purposeful. Siddhartha joins a group of ascetics to find enlightenment. Now, I'm just going to say this as like a little cultural background, but, Siddhartha, Buddha, eventually will become Buddha. This was part of the culture that already existed. There was in certain castes, that is expected of you. You work your life, you build your fortune, you take care of the kids, the house, you make money, whatever. And then at 50 or 55, you would become an ascetic. You would go to either a monastery, become a monk, become a devotee. You take time for your religious enlightenment, right? To find the mystery. That was part of certain caste expectations. And I'm thinking of the Brahma specifically. So, and I'm not an expert in this, but, so a lot of people are like, well, what kind of man would leave his family and do this? It was expected, that wasn't out of the blue. It wasn't like he was abandoning his family. I mean, he was, but also that wasn't as surprising as you would think, right? So some see the figure as of the hermit as sort of doing this thing, but he's really the magician mid-quest, right? He's the one finding the answers to the mysteries of the elements, the universe, the infinite. Then he comes back as the magician, as a number 1 instead of number 9. But there is a kind of completion that happens in the 9s. So we're looking at what is the completion cycle. It is understanding. It is wisdom, knowledge, intuition, spiritual connection, guides, teachers. We're looking at all of the things in the Hermit. What we're looking at is all the things that represent and embody the spiritual quest. Okay, so many of us on this path, those of us who read tarot, those of us who do spiritual work, we can really relate to the Hermit. We've gone in those processes of learning and learning and learning, and then we emerge and we want to share that with other people. So the Hermit, when we receive it, we either think of the solitude ending, that we get to come back in, or, we get to go up into the mountain. But, that's up to you. We often can tell this by the other cards around it, or what we're asking about. Now, one of my favorite quotes is, "It's easy to be a holy man on top of a mountain." And what this means is it's really easy to be super spiritual when you're not being challenged by the daily life things. Like if you're not being cut off in traffic, how can you really test your patience? How can you really test your spiritual challenges, right? When we connect only with spirit and only with divine, we're cut off from the irritants of life. And the irritants of life are our teachers. We absorb and learn through meditation, prayer, books, reading, writing, opening to spirit. But it's only when we interact with the messy, imperfect, complicated humans, other humans, not spiritual humans, that our true spirituality rises out of us. Are we compassionate? Are we loving? Are we taking people where they are? Are we holding space for them? So this is how we kind of measure our spiritual wellness, is how we're dealing with other people. Are we kind? So the Hermit completes his cycle of solitude. Then he must learn, okay, now I have to find a community. Now I have to apply this. Now I have to take acolytes, or whatever you want to call them. And so much of this card's about humility. And I know what you're thinking. You just talked about him being wise and all this stuff, and that's right. But wisdom is kind of having the humility to find a teacher, even though you have considerable knowledge. Or humility is the ability to just listen, even though you have answers. You wait to be asked for the answers. Okay, so we're going to kind of embrace the curiosity of our spiritual path. Like, how have we grown and learned, and how can we be of service to others? So when our anger flares up, it's like the Hermit has that detachment that says not, hey, you can't be angry. It's like, ooh, anger, what's this all about? Why are you here? I've learned about anger. I meditated on anger. Now I get to practice dealing with anger. Right? So, one of the things that I talked about probably in June is how our teachers are the things that provoke resentments, the things that provoke discomfort, the things that provoke some of those shadow emotions that we're not always comfortable with. Okay, so but that's kind of the point. If we get curious about them, then and they challenge our spiritual beliefs, then we can grow, right? So, Pema Chodron has this wonderful lesson about Shempa, which is basically what she calls all those places that we still get hooked into are more difficult emotions or challenging emotions. And while Buddhism teaches there's like a certain amount of pain that's inevitable in life, like growing old and sickness and separating from people that we love, on top of that, there is this idea of suffering of our own mind, right? And so that's kind of getting hooked into the mind. And so it's like the spiral into blaming, shaming, anger, low self-esteem, denigrating it yourself. Maybe if you have addictions or something going to that, all these things are our hookable places. And they usually are about criticism of the self. When somebody criticizes you or your appearance or your work or how you're driving, or they criticize your child or whatever, it's kind of brings up that, suffering, the storytelling. And Pema Chodron basically says the job of the spiritual teacher, the spiritual friend, is to insult you, because what you're trying to do is see where your Shenpa arises and then work with it. So much of the major arcana are about our spiritual condition. And I think like no other card epitomizes this more than the Hermit, because it is the card of the seeker. It is the card of a person on a quest for the truth. And so, when I pull this card for one of my clients or students, they're at a crossroads usually. Maybe they've been working with the teacher. Maybe they are just studying alone. Like whatever it is, if they've been studying alone, that I'm going to encourage them to find a teacher. If they've been studying with a teacher, then I'm going to encourage them to try it alone. Because the Hermit comes out of one situation as going into another. The completion of a cycle. That's that 9. And so they're ready either for that time of solitude or a vision quest, or they're ready to end the vision quest. Okay. And, a lot of times this can be like just a card that comes up for education, or a card that comes up when someone's on the spiritual journey. So the Hermit can be about being alone as well, like either physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And some people will see it and be like, oh, that means I'm alone. It's like, yeah, it does. It can be about loneliness. It can be about aloneness, especially if it comes in reverse and we're looking at isolating versus solitude. And those two concepts are very different. Isolating is when you're purposefully making up excuses not to interact with people. You're hiding something about yourself. You're hiding something about someone else. Okay. So though some would say that loneliness is the work of the Hermit, it isn't really about that. It's about feeling the uncomfortable emotions, like how we use other people to fill space, how we use other people to direct attention away from our own mind and our own self and move it to other people. So we're just dealing with this stranger in your head. We're learning about them. We're acquainting ourselves. We're falling in love with them. And so as we move through the month, we can be wrestling with this Hermit-like issues of aloneness, isolation, and Shenpa. Okay? So our plant medicine for October is actually 2. I pulled Damiana and Mugwort, and I work with them together, so it was kind of fortuitous that I pulled them. I work with them for dream work, and I, will use that medicine for teas. So let me talk about Damiana first, then we'll move into Mugwort. But Damiana is an herb of the New World, so it's native to Mexico and southern United States. And its first mention of its use was through the chronicles of a Spanish missionary. And his name is Jesus Maria de Salvatierra. And it was mentioned in 1699. And basically talked about how the indigenous peoples of Mexico had been using Damiana as an aphrodisiac, which is what Damiana is famous for. So it is used as a love herb. It's also used for joy and for kind of like ecstasy kind of feeling. The botanical name is Tunera diffusa. Okay, but I'm sure I pronounced that wrong. That's the Latin. It's basically a woody shrub with small leaves. Extends from southern Texas to South America and east to the Caribbean. So Damiana is in the Tuneraceae family, and about half of them are in that Tunera genus. But the common name for Damiana is from the Greek, meaning to tame or subdue. And the feminine version of Damian, which basically is the wild one who tames. Okay, so kind of giving it a feminine idea, or a feminine identity, maybe is better to say. It's believed that indigenous Guaycura of the Baja region of Mexico, they were the first to use the Damiana. And according to the legend, the herb became more widely distributed when the Guaycura began trading with the Aztec. So Damiana is been valued or has been valued in ancient times by the Mayan, the Aztecs, the Guaycura. It was used in Mexico, Central America, and South America. And in traditional medicine, it's used as a diuretic, laxative, stimulant, aphrodisiac, and also to treat diabetes and venereal diseases. And honestly, Damiana, the aphrodisiac elements of Damiana is where it's most used. And it's, also thought to be a mood enhancer. It was given as a beverage for children to relax them. It was also a digestive stimulant. And so you can smoke them, you can use them as tea, you can infuse in sweet liqueur. And it's also macerated and used as a Damiana extract. In modern times, it's used in herbal smokes, really, and it's used as a liqueur. I think there's a really famous liqueur by Rosemary Gladstar. That's Damiana Chocolate Love Liqueur. And she made a beautiful recipe for that. I can put that in the show notes if you're interested. But, I think more impressive than an aphrodisiac, Damiana is used as an antidepressant. And it is really beautiful to kind of talk about it in terms of that, because it can kind of help you feel like you're strengthening yourself and your central nervous system and your emotions, because it holds you, because it feels very loving and nurturing. Okay. And so even though it's used to increase libido, it does that primarily because it de-stresses you and helps you deal with low energy. It doesn't have caffeine, but it has an activating element. So it's really great to blend with other teas. And part of it is because it's bitter. So you're not drinking or smoking Damiana alone, and a little bit goes a long way. Okay. And so if you're doing magic, if you're a witch and you're using Damiana, you can use it for sex magic or for love work, connection work. Now, mugwort, on the other hand, is a source of flavoring beverages and foods for a very long time. Mugwort is Artemisia vulgaris. It sounds magical. All right. And a lot of the folklore around the plant is that mugwort is a dream ally. It is the herb of lucid dreaming, of being able to control your journeys, your dreams, etc. So it's very aromatic, and it grows along creek banks. So it's known for having like this silvery shine under its leaves. And it always is said that like mugwort grows in witches' back doors, But funnily enough, like we used to have this deck on the back of our house, and we had all these plants growing out from underneath the deck, and I would pull them. And one day I realized that what I was pulling was mugwort. I had just tons of it under my deck. So it really was by my back door, which was great to find out. So you can dry it and then use it for tea, use it for smoking. You can even use it for smoke cleansing bundles, or, what used to be called smudging. Like you can use it for that. You can use it for dream pillows. You can infuse it into botanical vinegars. There's so much you can do with mugwort. The Aztec considered mugwort a sacred plant. It was used for incense. And many people see it growing and they're just like, oh, that weed. But if you know it, you know it. I know when I was in Oregon, it just grew wild along the creeks and the rivers. Mugwort is very stately. It's very self-assured. It's a perennial, and it grows sometimes over 6 feet. Can be very tall. If it has the right conditions, it'll just keep going and going. And, it has been used medicinally everywhere, pretty much everywhere it grows. It's a very common plant in the British Isles, but it's also common in the United States. Now, mugwort is said to have derived its name from having been used to flavor beer before the use of hops. But the botanical name derives from Artemis, so it's Artemisia, the Greek goddess of the hunt, fertility, the forest, and the hills. And Roman soldiers were known to put mugwort in their sandals to keep their feet from getting tired. Now, Native Americans kind of equate mugwort with witchcraft. They believe that rubbing the leaves on the body kept the ghosts away. So a lot of times you'll bundle up like wild mugwort. You'll see it. You can tie it up with its own stems and then run it over your energy field just like a broom, right? And it helps to kind of protect your energy, especially if you're in a place that you feel there's ghosts or spirits or elementals that aren't going to do you kindness. A necklace of mugwort leaves is said to protect against dreaming about the dead. And it's believed John the Baptist wore a girdle of mugwort in the wilderness for protection against spirits. So other magical attributes are protection for the road-weary traveler and general protection against evil. It's really, it used to be known as cronewort because it was such a ally to the witches. And so sometimes it's used as the symbol of the witch or the healer or the midwife, and it was hung outside the door just so people would be able to recognize, oh, that's the midwife store. But I think, if you think of Artemisia and the Greek goddess Artemis, the moon goddess as well, and the patronage of women in all phases of life, you can also see that it has a use for women as the maiden, the mother, and the crone. So during menstruation, in childbirth, and during menopause. So because it has been used for so many different reproductive disorders, we entitle it the mother of herbs. So it has, if something has a lot of nicknames, it's good. In shamanistic cultures, it's used to facilitate communication with the ancestors in the spirit world because it is wonderful for journeying. So drinking a tea before journey is excellent. So in medieval times, the herb was passed from the pagan goddess Artemis to the Christian saint John the Baptist. And that's kind of this idea that the saint carried the herb into the wilderness to ward off evil. And so a lot of people wear mugwort garlands on St. John's Day. Now, I use mugwort for dream work, for lucid dreaming, and I use it as a tea. And so, I mix it with Damiana as well as other other herbs. So I mix mugwort and Damiana together with other herbs in a tea blend called Dream Tea. And I base my tea blend on the blend that I bought from Mountain Rose Herbs. I buy that blend a lot, but if I run out of it, I just mix my own. And so if you're doing the Earth Medicine box for this month's Earth Medicine, that will be in there. The Dream Tea will be in there. That's how I'll pass on the herbs of mugwort and Damiana. So there's that. Okay. Now let's move on to the stone medicine. And that's the stone medicine is, of course, threefold. I always pick 3 stones. But our first one is Charoite. Now, Charoite is a black and purple stone. It activates the third eye, the crown, the soul star, and all those transpersonal chakras that we work with. And its mineral makeup is pretty complicated. It has potassium, sodium, calcium, barium, strontium, oxygen, silicon, hydrogen, and it's got a hardness of 6. So it's often faked if you're buying it from China and it looks like super light purple, just be careful. Sometimes Chinese charoite is actually fluorite. It's from Russia, period. It's from the Charo River in Siberia. That's why it's called charoite. So just kind of make sure you know a little bit about charoite when you're buying it online. So charoite's a stone that activates into it. Can be a little expensive, by the way, too. So just so you know. But charoite's a stone that activates intuition and psychic abilities. It activates dream work. It does shamanic journey. It helps you discover your true path. Charoite is a wonderful ally for understanding who you are in the world and what you're meant to do. So it's a taskmaster, and in the Book of Stones, Naisha Asian, who is now Samaya Aster, but I'm still going to call her Naisha Asian so you have a reference in that book. Otherwise, you'll be lost. But charoite is this is what she says. Charoite is a clear, strict, and powerful teacher. When one veers from one's appointed path, engages in negative behavior, self-sabotage, or attempts to cop out on one's spiritual work, charoite's energy is right there to hold an energetic mirror in front of one's face. For those serious about working on themselves and who are ready to commit to their paths of service, charoite can be the best of friends and one's greatest ally. So charoite is one of those stones that has lots of dendritic formations that are black, so it can be super grounding and protective while you're doing that discovery work. So it can be an ally that calls you out when you're in an ego loop, but also helps you move into like really intuitive spaces. It's great for dream work. It's great for psychic work. It's great for card pulling and channeling and automatic writing. It's great for all that. So charoite's also really good at humbling you, not humiliating you, but humbling you. And so I love working with charoite. In Naisha Asian's cards, she says, charoite, the path of service, which is one of my core values. And so I do want to be walking that path of service. And so charoite's been a great ally for me for many years. Next stone is Moonstone. I love working with Moonstone. I feel like we've done Moonstone so many times, but it comes up a lot, and I think it's because it's such a wonderful ally with lots of connection to spiritual work, so it comes up a lot. But Moonstone is a feldspar. It has a Mohs hardness of 6.5, just like charoite. Through pictures, it's really hard to kind of capture the elegance and the sheen of Moonstone. And of course, the higher quality, you'll see this different chatoyance that comes in. So chatoyance is that play of light within the layers of Moonstone that give it kind of like a reflective quality. And that sheen is what it's named for, because it's really about the full moon, right? It reminds you of the full moon when you look at it correctly. Now, Moonstone is considered a stone of the goddess. And so there are a number of different types of Moonstone. And so I'm just going to say this. I'm not going to go into the whole spiel, but rainbow Moonstone, or that white Moonstone that you'll see with like black spots in it, that's actually white labradorite. They called it Moonstone, but it isn't technically a Moonstone. When you go for Moonstone, you know, more often than not, as a tarot teacher and a crystal healer, I will go for peach Moonstone because it really resonates deeply in the sacral chakra, and it helps with balancing feminine issues, cooling hot flashes, working with hormonal issues, working with PCOS, any of those things it's going to help with. So it's perfect for me to be working with as a healer. But you can pick, like, there's gray Moonstone or black Moonstone, and they each have very similar qualities. It's just when you look at the gray or the black, you're dealing with shadowy, So I tend to work with like peach Moonstone at the full moon and black Moonstone at the new moon. Why? Just because it matches the energy to me. But like I said, Moonstone is an orthoclase feldspar mineral, and it's mined in a lot of places, but primarily you'll see it out of Sri Lanka or South India. So it's composed of orthoclase and then a layer of albite, and these components separate into layers during the formation. And so when the light falls between the layers and scatters, that's where we see that glow coming from inside. And that effect is called adorescence. I always pronounce that weird, but it's a long word because it just is. So I have trouble saying it. But it's worth noting that the glows can be different. You can see blue, you can see gray, you can see white. And so, when I said, oh, it's a labradorite, not a moonstone, that rainbow moonstone, the white one, that's because of the way the light refracts inside of it. Labradorite has what's called labradorescence. It's specific to labradorite. So can you use white or rainbow moonstone instead of peach moonstone? Absolutely. They have very similar energies, which is, partially because they glow. They have that connection to the moon. They have connection to intuition and psychic abilities. It's just the peach is going to be better at balancing the sacral chakra energy, has that kind of more gentle energy. And I would use more of that white moonstone for the psychic work part, So just kind of think of it that way, or the rainbow moonstone. It's worth mentioning that the intensity of the adorescence varies depending on the layers. So some stones have more luminescence and others you hardly see. It just looks like a peach stone, right? But the ways and the reasons we would use moonstone is for intuition, dream work, insights, mysteries. Again, it's very good physically for balancing the energy in the sacral and for any feminine or hormonal issues. And the connection with the moonstone really is that deep connection with the moon cycles, right? So that's part of why we look at our cycles as well. Now, the third stone that we're working with is hematite. And hematite, is one of my favorites. I think so many of us work with hematite because it's beautiful. It looks like just pure silver, but what it actually is an iron oxide. It has a Mohs hardness of about 5 or 6, but hematite is named after the Greek word for blood, and it streaks red. So when you get a hematite, it doesn't come out of the earth like silver like that. That's what happens when you polish it, like that gunmetal silver. But it sometimes will look like reddish. That's that iron, okay? But, a little polishing gets it to that silver place. It's just an awesome balancer, grounder, purifier. It resonates in the root chakra, so it's awesome ally in the Earth Star chakra as well, so really grounding. Our Earth's core, scientists think, is iron, and so it kind of feels like it immediately connects you to the Earth's core. And so much of my crystal healing arsenal is made up of grounding stones, and hematite is one of my go-tos. It's really good for protecting against extremely low frequency energy, like from your computer or from, other people, thinking of like empaths, and being mindful of our delicate energy system. But hematite is really effective for protecting. Okay. And it's effective for grounding. And it's readily accessible. So, there's no excuse not to have a hematite on you. Now, one thing we don't mention with hematite often is that it clears the energy field and then fills it with light. So you can use hematite for filling your energy with light and connecting with light because it helps us move from polarities to unification. So it's really good for that kind of energy. It's great for manifestation work. It's great for kind of thinking of how do I transmute this energy, meaning how do I take it from one way of being to another? Okay, so physically we're going to use it for blood, anything with the blood like diabetes, anemia, any of the blood disorders you can use hematite for. It's also great for pain. It's great for pain in the legs, for stability. And just a note that if you buy hematite that's a magnet and it looks exactly like regular hematite, magnetized hematite is not naturally magnetized. It is magnetized by humans, and it's not even a hematite as we would know. It doesn't come out of the earth that way. It's ground up and then reconstituted and magnetized. So it's not, we don't use that magnetic hematite in crystal healing. I have a number of them on my fridge because I love that they look like stones and they hold things really, really well. But they're not used in crystal healing. So just pick up the regular hematite that's non-magnetized. Okay. Now, I had a weird experience this month with pulling the animal medicine, which is that I generally I have a number of animal decks that I use. And I've really been using this Susan Seeden Boulet's. She has an animal deck that's just like her beautiful paintings and like a short description on the back. And so I pulled it out and I shuffled and I pulled a card and it looked like a raven. And then when I read it, I realized what I had done was pulled a deck that looks very similar to the animal deck called the Goddess deck. And I pulled Valkyrie. And so I thought I would bring Valkyrie in for you because the Valkyries are a wonderful spirit guide to be working with. And then we'll also bring in another animal guide. But the Valkyries are goddesses of life, death, battle, magic. They serve as psychopomps and divine escorts, guiding souls to the next realm. Now, so the Valkyries are from Norse writings and mythology. So the original Valkyries were the daughters of Odin and Herta, and their ranks basically started to swell to include the deified priestesses of Odin. So their leader is Freya, operating under the nom de guerre Valfreya. And so individual Valkyries like Broomhilda, Hilda, Sigrun achieved renown are sometimes venerated independently, okay? And they're venerated alongside Freya and Herta and Odin. So the name Valkyrie derives from Val, which V-A-L-R, which means fallen in battle, and Kyria, which means, now I pronounce that probably Spanish, and it's not pronounced that way, but anyway, she who chooses. So she who chooses those that are fallen in battle. So while Valkyries aren't exclusively battlefield goddesses, they also serve as escorts for those dying exclusively. Their most famous role was to help those who died in battle to get to Valhalla. Okay, so according to Norse cosmology, souls of dead warriors journey to Freya's hall, and then the other half will go to Valhalla, Odin's hall, and the Valkyries select the warriors going to Valhalla and serve as their escort. So souls arriving at Valhalla are greeted by Valkyries bearing drinking horns filled with Odin's best mead. Okay, and in Valhalla, Valkyries supervise hospitality service. They keep an eye on distributing the drink, and they basically serve as Odin's hostesses. So Valkyries are also considered like bird goddesses, and that's because they manifest as birds and they communicate as birds. So their origins may lie in the ancient swan goddesses, but they often will come with the raven, which is the symbol of Odin. Now, Valkyries are also considered shamanic goddesses. They sometimes are considered erotic goddesses. They can enter into sacred marriages with shaman, warriors, or heroes, though not, necessarily all of them do this, but Valkyries will guide, protect, and sponsor their human lovers. And that's the idea, is that, okay, if I take you on, I'm your benefactor as a Valkyrie. And I would decide, when to help, when not to help. And they basically are the ones making the decisions of who dies in battle. But Valkyries are said to teach shamanic skills, martial arts, battle spells, ruin, reading. They teach and sponsor women and men. There wasn't a sense of like one or the other that they would be guides to. So they're psychic, spiritual, and magical warriors. And they are wonderful allies. And so they're also associated with the Aurora Borealis, And again, they're associated with Raven. So the idea is that Raven, in the stories of the Valkyries, are the ones that will talk to humans, and kind of pass that information. Now, what's interesting about this is that when I actually did pull an animal card, I ended up going like with a different deck altogether, even though I had intended on getting that animal spirit deck from Susan Susan Boulay Seaton. I ended up pulling out my deck from Kim Cran's The Wild Unknown deck. Is that what it's called? No. Well, I pulled the Animal Spirit. Yeah, it is the Wild Unknown Animal Spirit deck. And I pulled the Phoenix. So she has a whole category. She has 7 mythical creatures in there. And the Phoenix, the 7 are associated basically with different chakras. And so the Phoenix is associated with the root chakra. So the Phoenix is actually shown in all of classical antiquity in a lot of different cultures. So first of all, it's all through the Mediterranean, but then you'll see it in Chinese and in Japanese kind of ideology as well. So it's basically associated with the worship of the sun. Now, the Egyptian phoenix was said to be as large as an eagle with brilliant scarlet and gold plumage and having this melodious cry. And the idea here is there's only one phoenix that existed at a time. And it was very long-lived, like no less than 500 years or something like that. But as its end approached, it would tell, the humans, like, my time is coming. And it would fashion a nest of aromatic boughs and spices and then set it on fire and be consumed in the flames. And from the fire, a new phoenix would arise. Okay. So, and as it arose, it would be like it would arise from an egg of myrrh. Okay, so that's the smell it would have. And then it flew to the Heliopolis, so the city of the sun in Egypt, where it was deposited on the altar at the temple of the god of the sun, Ra. And so the young phoenix kind of, arising, kind of gave this idea that the phoenix was associated with immortality, of course, because it has this rebirth, this death and rebirth. And that's a lovely image. It became, very widespread in late antiquity, and phoenix was compared to Rome. And it appeared on the coinage of the Roman Empire as the symbol of eternity, right? Of the eternal city of Rome. Because it keeps resurrecting after it gets conquered. And then all these ideas, of course, are in Christianity. Now, in Islamic mythology, the phoenix is identified as Anka, a huge mysterious bird that looks like a heron and probably is a heron, that was associated with as a creation of God. And has all this perfection and then is later seen as a plague and is killed. So it has this like rebirth, birth idea. And it's all over classical literature. I mean, Hesiod talks about it, and that's kind of 8th and 7th century BCE. Herodotus talks about it in 5th century BCE. Aelian, Philostratus, that's like 1st and 2nd century AD. Ovid in the Metamorphoses talks about it. That's 1st century BCE to 1st century ADE. CE. ADE, that's not a thing. So you'll just kind of hear about the phoenix and all of these ideas of, and even in Harry Potter we see it, right? The phoenix that lives with Dumbledore and then rises, But, we'll be working with Phoenix and Journey this month as a birth and rebirth. So we'll be doing a bit of fire dismemberment for rebirth in our journey, and that'll be fun. So if you're a member, remember that you get that journey as part of your membership. And I do readings at all the lunations, so those points on the full moon and the new moon eclipses. I'll be there doing readings for my group. And I do a collective reading, meaning a reading for all of us on the energy. And I do astrology check-ins. We also have a Facebook group that we talk in. We have weekly circles and meditations a couple times a week. We do a lot of fun stuff. So check out my website if you're interested, and have a good October.
Thanks for listening to Centered with me, Angie Yingst. If you'd like to send me a question or comment about this show or any shows, you can send them to Angie at themoonandstone.com.